Awesome. Okay. Sweet. So the first thing I would say is, could you briefly introduce yourself and kind of some of your experience in the culinary space within a few sentences?
Okay. My name is Nikki Pettineo, and I've been cooking professionally since 2007. Now, I really gravitate towards being a culinary educator, and it's hard to give the elevator pitch, but I also have a seasoning company called Pro Seasoning. I teach private lessons, private cooking lessons, and I'm the culinary director at a place called Independence Landing.
Yeah, the whole nine. You're multifaceted within the space of culinary, which I think is
Yeah.
it's kind of eye opening for somebody who's thinking about the career path. It's like there are so many things you can do, and you are proof of that. Is so was your first private chef job with Ronaldo Hill at the Miami Dolphins? Was that the first private chef job?
Yes, that was
Okay,
my first private chef job. I met Ronaldo Hill, I'm from South Florida, and the Dolphins training camp was right by a restaurant that I worked in, and, it was kind of like an upscale restaurant, so we always had Dolphin players come and, like, after practice or whatever during their camps and stuff, and I met Ronaldo, and he needed a chef for the season, and I had just finished culinary school, and, I did kinda like a little stage or a little tryout for him, and, he liked my food, and I worked for him for a bunch of season. It was about 5 seasons. Yeah.
that's yeah, that's good. That's overall
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, but it was, like, through networking, I just you never know who you're gonna meet, you never know what their needs are, so my policy is always to shake hands with everybody, talk to them, and, you never know what your next opportunity could be, and for me, that really started my career. So, I'm really thankful for that. And I talk to him occasionally and, we always touch base and see how each other's doing and stuff. And so, yeah, I was really, really fortunate that that opportunity came my way.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. The relationships too, that's so important over time. It's awesome. That's something Michael and I have been kind of learning throughout this process is that's so key to just understand that as anyone in business. I guess on that journey, like as a first starting out as a private chef, was there anything in particular you learned in that moment that, oh, this is actually how it works in culinary? Like this is how you secure a job or networking is important. And is there anything like that you didn't realize until then?
I mean, I learned a lot during that time. Once I worked for him, I worked for a bunch of different players for different, things for them. So, you know, for some of my clients would be on, really strict diets because in professional sports, inflammation is something that they really try and like especially as the player gets older, the athletes get older, they get like real, concerned with that. So I had a client that was on like a really insane elimination diet where it wasn't like we were eliminating things, we were putting things back. So he could only eat had tested his DNA and he could only eat like a certain he could only eat buffalo, coconut, which was okay because with coconut you get once that got added to the list, I was like, "Okay, cool." So now there's coconut flour, there's coconut sugar, there's coconut fat, so I can make a little, like, shortbread cookie for this guy who's, like, uh, a peak athlete. He's got, like, these limited amount of things, spelt, he could have spelt, and I'm like, "Okay, so I can do, like, spelt berries, I can do spelt tortillas and things like that." So, so that one I learned so much from. And I did, I made mistakes along the way too. Like the same client, I almost burned his friggin' house down because the barbecue grill caught on fire. So I mean, like, I did like a lot of rookie dumb things, but like professionally, I just kind of, I was in food service for a long time. I've been in food service since 1998. I started as a bartender years ago at Applebee's. That was like one of my first restaurant jobs. I was a server and then I was a bartender and, I just kind of, stayed in restaurants. I like being in service, so, I learned how to serve my clients. I learned, how to be a little bit more professional with, how I'm carrying myself and that sort of thing. And yeah, definitely, to circle back to the networking thing, I mean, I met a bunch of different players that had different needs, and I would, do catering for them, cater their birthday parties or baby showers. Oh my god, I would get these like last minute phone calls that it's the client and their and his wife's anniversary, and can I make dinner for them on the beach, and so I'm out there with a table and chairs in the sand, and I get a server lined up, and yeah, exactly, we're like, okay, we got to get these flameless candles, and it was just like, ready set cook, and I also learned, like, that food, like, cooking, professional cooking is not like it is on TV, where it's like, okay, you have these competitions and stuff. Well, I mean, you can plan all day long, but what happens when your cooler goes down, your freezer goes down, like freaking the drains are backing up, that's like real life. So, you go from chef to plumber in like 2.2 seconds. So, it's like problem solving and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's I don't know if I answered your question, but
But yeah,
it's trial by fire, when you kind of put yourself out there, and basically if you show up and you do a good job, and you really kind of like focus on serving the need of the job in any field, you're going to do well, and people are going to call you, and they're going to keep calling you back, and you'll get more and more opportunities. So that's how kind of it worked out for me.
absolutely. Yeah. Trial by fire. That's a great way to put it. Like learning
Hmm.
by doing.
Yep.
You have to be multifaceted, is what Michael and I have learned from just interviewing professionals like yourself. There's so much to it. There's like a little surface cream of the crop that a lot of people see, and they kind of see
Yeah.
past a lot of
Like,
those
what
other
what
things.
I know about refrigeration, I shouldn't know. Like, if I wasn't a chef, like, I would, like, have no idea how the condensation works, the compressor, like, all that stuff. Like, I shouldn't know that as a layman, but as a chef, I'm like, I know exactly how that works, you know? So,
Yeah,
that's the kinda
absolutely.
stuff you learn.
Heck yeah.
Mhm.
The another question is, now with kind of serving more and more clients, was there like a point in which you learned that you realized that you needed more space, or you secured your, I think it was a catering kitchen. Like,
Yes.
did you have that kind of ahead of time? Were you thinking ahead, kind of like building the well before you needed it? Or was it like, oh, I'm running out of space, let's get that?
Yeah, like, I ran out of space, and I needed to get, like, proper license, and, have, like, a catering, like, commissary to work out of. I f we I had a business partner at the time, and we found, like, this shot out looking, like, restaurant that they gave us, like, free year no, sorry, free rent for a year, and, we didn't even have lights in the parking lot, but we cleaned it up, and, we pressured them to get lights in the parking lot so we can get some business, and we opened a little 40-seat restaurant with, 10 seats at the bar, and my dad built the bar, and we opened this little restaurant, and it was great. Like, we could cater out of it, we could do all kinds of stuff. We did, like, wine tastings, and, that just was it's just the next natural step to be able to continue to do what I wanted to do.
Absolutely. And was that the same restaurant you're talking about, like in 2008, where you had a business? Okay. What was, I guess, your experience, if you don't mind me asking, like, your
Yeah, yeah.
experience of kind of delegating and having to, was there like a moment in which you realized like this is too much with everything going on? Like how did you approach that? And was it like a, essentially just like the catering space?
Mhm.
It's like, did it come to you all like at a point in which you needed it, or were you already thinking about it and planning ahead?
I mean, I was planning ahead a little bit, and I had been in restaurants, at that time, 10 years before I opened up a restaurant. So, I had worked for, several different places, and the longest place that I worked at was a steakhouse, and it's called J. Alexander's, and it was very, very well organized. So I just kind of took that model with their standard operating procedures and things like that. Uh, kind of used that as how I wanted to manage the restaurant. I mean, I made mistakes as far as, like, I didn't, do any kind of, like, inventory, food cost, any of that kind of stuff. So if I could do it over again, I would definitely, that's what I kind of, like, specialize now. I do consulting for restaurants, and help them build an inventory, help them control their costs and things like that. So yeah, it does kind of like get a little overwhelming, because you can't really, when you have a restaurant, you can't really take a day off. It's your cooks are going to call in. Your cooks are going to call in from jail. You know what I mean? Like, and
Yeah, totally. Absolutely.
yeah, but like, like, that's just the nature, like, you just gotta keep on going, you gotta anticipate mostly that you're gonna be by yourself, because it's very, very common for people in food and beverage to kind of be free spirited and they'll just kind of disappear or whatever. And so, yeah, that's and then there's some people that, you can set your watch to that they'll just always be there. And so I'm really grateful for those people, obviously, because that's like, it's really, really, it's wonderful when people show up to work and like want to do their job and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's a huge undertaking owning a business, running especially a restaurant, and staying current, dealing with issues that you have with employees and things like that. But it's incredibly rewarding because when you turn around, you're like, I own this. I can make my own decisions. I don't really have anybody hanging over my head. I mean, the guests are hanging over your head, really, because if they want chicken tenders, I was like, I'm not serving chicken tenders in my restaurant. If you're a grown up and you're eating chicken tenders for dinner, like, I'm not here for that. So, I was really, hard driving a hard line. But then I realized, like, hey, give the people what they want. And the clientele that was coming in, they wanted those chicken tenders. So I said, you know what? I will make the best chicken tenders to my ability. So that's what we did.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, chicken tenders are a universal staple at, like, so
Yeah.
many restaurants. It's so funny to think about it that way. It's like, give them what they want.
And, like, real talk, I eat chicken tenders all the time, and so I was just being a jerk, like, coming out of school and just being like, "Whoa, you can't eat chicken tenders for you have to have trout," You know?
It's only trout,
And I
only
would like to
trout.
smack my former self in the face with that trout right now.
Trout and grouper, that's
That's
all.
right.
Yeah, was there 2 questions? One question is, if you were to give a culinary student who's considering the path of, like, chef ownership or maybe
Mhm.
just somebody being a restaurateur, what would be, like, your one tip of free consulting advice to that person?
I worked on a private yacht after I had the restaurant. I was in like a lot of financial debt because it was 2008. And then I realized what an amazing career yachting is. If you're coming out of school and you're in all this school debt, you make a ridiculous amount of money. So I was able to like pay off my student loans and pay off all the money I owed for, because I had the restaurant and everything. And came back to land, after 2 years with, like, a good little nest egg that I was able to pay for my bachelor's degree with, so, I would suggest, I mean, if you're in a even if you're not, as in a city that, where you can, get on a yacht. Fort Lauderdale's like the yachting capital of the world. It's very friendly for, getting, hired by a yacht, and, uh you can pay off your loans and you can stack a little bit of money, to get that dream that you want. So, my advice is don't continue to get yourself in debt. It's find something like that where you can pay everything off and then start with, and it's like, you learn a lot working on a boat because, the world becomes very small when you're working on a boat and you learn about new ingredients, you learn about different way people dine. We're American, so we for instance, like, the crew was mostly like British and Australian and South African. I was the only American. The captain was American, but he had been, so he's not really, he was on a boat for like the last 30 years, so he's like but I'd make pizza for the crew and with salad and freaking garlic knots and stuff, and they'd go, "Where's the french fries?" And I'm like, "What?" Like, we don't eat french fries. Like, why would I serve french fries with pizza? But it's like that's how they that's how they eat their pizza. And so you learn like little things like that, when you're working internationally. So definitely look for opportunities like that. My career has been, like we talked about, is been kind of is not been very traditional. I didn't go into a hotel and slog away, working my way up. I've never even I've never worked in a hotel in my life. So, finding things like that will definitely make a difference. And then the other thing is, like, make sure you have a good structure before you open a restaurant. Like, you have to do, it sucks, but you have to do inventory. You have to log everything that comes in. You have to know what it costs. You have to calculate your food costs so that you know that you're making money on something. And then let's say your most popular item, you can, you're selling a lot of this one particular thing, but the food cost on it, the margin is slim. Well, you got to figure out how to make that margin a little bit bigger, so maybe you change a couple of ingredients, maybe maybe you make it by hand instead of buying certain things, and you'll make definitely make more money that way. But you have to have some sort of like goal where you say, okay, the food cost was 27% this week. That's pretty good. Maybe it's 50%. You're like, oh my god, it's the food cost this week is 50%. I need to get some stuff out of the freezer and start, kind of running some specials that will, taste good, obviously, but be creative to make sure you're making money. That's the thing, is that is it's really hard to make money in the food and beverage industry unless you're like living by, cost, chasing the paper products, for instance, napkins, forks, that all that kind of stuff. If you can move the needle on what you're, spending on paper products and stuff, you can make more money that way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's even that's something Michael and I have realized too, and we've heard it from Leon and another chef owner like Rebecca Kelly Manders. They
Mhm.
were just talking about like the actual price of a steak and the actual price of like what you're getting
Yeah.
and how like thinking, understanding that the margins are very thin and
Mhm.
it's like a game of how do you work with that. And
Yes.
I did have a question about your yacht experience. Just that environment. How was that for you? I know was there like adversity? Was it tough to like acclimate to it? Just what were your if you could flash back to that version of
Yeah.
yourself?
I mean, like, I am not a tropical person. I am, I'm not like a sun person, like, where I'm like, "Oh, let me get in the sun." Everybody's like a 6-foot blonde. Okay, so let me put it to you this way. Like, at the time, I'm not sure if it's like this anymore. I mean, this is like 13 years ago, I worked on a boat. But let's say, for instance, you got hired by a yacht and, you were not attractive or you were overweight or, you just didn't fit the physical profile that they were anticipating, they would give you a plane ticket back home. They have to repatriate you. So they'd send you. So you might apply for a job and the boat's in Spain. They'll fly you to Spain. And then you get there, first thing you do is go right to the captain. And then they might first the chief stew might look you up and down and go, no, and just give you a plane ticket, back. They'll be like, you won't fit in our uniforms. For me, like I've never been like a person that, I'm 5 feet tall. I don't really look like somebody, who's typically on a boat. I'm also queer. There, yeah, that was like kind of isolating. So it was, some of it I think I got in my own way. As far as like the isolating part, it was a very, I think it's a different time now, because like when I see what goes on below deck, I'm like, they got tattoos. Like we couldn't have any we couldn't have any visible tattoos, like, nothing like that. So yeah, I definitely stuck out like a sore thumb. But it was a great experience nonetheless. I saw some places in the world I would never have been able to go to or, experience. So, even though some of that time that I worked on the boat was like, a little depressing, it was, definitely that was definitely times I was very, unhappy, in my cabin, like, weeping softly into my little cabin pillow. But, the trade out was that I was getting paid a really great, salary, and I was experiencing this parallel universe that not everybody gets to experience. I mean, I've worked for a billionaire. I learned that billionaires are not any happier than us regular folk. In fact, they're almost like an unfillable hole. So it was like, I just kind of would observe what, like, you just kind of get introspective, you get, a little bit mindful, and you take a look back and you go, what's going on here? This guy's friggin' miserable. This guy is friggin' miserable, and he's really trying hard to make us all miserable. So I learned that, there's not everybody, but some billionaires, they're an unfillable hole. Like there's not enough that they can that they can get to make them bring them to a point where it's like, "Okay, I'm happy now," you know? So I was like,
Mhm.
"Okay, well, I guess that's not the answer to life. It's definitely not money because this guy's freaking, cannot be soothed at all whatsoever." So, I mean, imagine now somebody gave you a couple $1,000,000,000 and you're on your boat. Like, wouldn't you be happy as Larry? Like, just, you're like, "Okay, well, cool," but it's not the case sometimes for some people. So, there was a lot of life lessons, um, you know, uh, that I learned. Yeah, so definitely, would recommend, would go in with, kind of your eyes open.
Absolutely, yeah. The experience and life lessons in themselves are so valuable, and it kinda shows you, especially early on in your career, it's like, what do you want for yourself? What are you aiming towards, and what's the environment you're setting up, and, just the realities of what some of that stuff is on the inside. And I do have a question,
Mhm.
just this is outside of, like, our kinda talk, is it's 4:56, so I wanna be generous of your time.
Yeah,
I'm able to go over, but if you wanna lock it at 5, I can do that and,
all
like,
good.
ask only a certain. Okay, okay. Since that is the case, you are very unique in the sense of you've had these experiences, you're queer, and I was just curious on, like, the how does inclusivity play a role in all of this? And, like, essentially, if you're building a team, you're building a kitchen or a brigade or anything like that,
Mhm.
or just being a business owner in general,
Yeah.
what's the relationship there? And, like, hospitality, inclusivity, business, etc.
I mean, from my perspective, I've learned, I've learned throughout the years is never assume that you know somebody's ability, never assume that you know what someone's thinking, never assume that you know how they interpret information, just kind of give people space to be them within reason, obviously, but giving people space to be them and finding what they thrive, how they, what they, what they excel at, and feeding that, just being really observant, and not jumping down anybody's throat or wishing that they would be one way when I want them another way. It's just not going to happen. You can't change people. I mean, you can coach them, but changing someone's personality or changing someone, their actual like essence is not possible. So I just really think that the more diversity you have, it kind of just weaves a beautiful tapestry of people that are just doing their thing, and everybody has something to add. Everyone has something that they're good at, and it's just finding that thing and finding, how to get along in the sandbox. You're not going to it's not going to make you any worse if you're around good people that are just different from you. You're only going to get better. That's the thing. You're only gonna keep learning. You're only gonna keep, just continuously learning about what's different from how you think is really it's really good for you.
Well said. Yeah, that's huge. It's just different perspectives on an objective thing, which is could be like a dish, it could be the world, it can be anything like that. It's so cool to hear others and how they interpret it and stuff. And you never know how that may change your worldview or
Yeah.
view about anything, to be honest. But
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
So the next question is, I want to stay on this before going into the pro seasoning.
Mhm.
Your so I know you mentioned that you used to teach classes at a prison as well as your current endeavor at Independence Landing, and that's kind of an example of not judging books by their cover and kind of including people that of all different types that have their own perspective. So I'd love to hear just more about that, about your experience with the prison and those individuals there, and then into Independence Landing and kind of what that is.
Right. So I was a culinary instructor through Tallahassee Community College, which is now Tallahassee State College. And at the time, I don't know if they still have this, but they had a contract with the Department of Corrections, the Florida Department of Corrections, to teach workforce development. And I taught for a couple of years in a prison, and so that was also another experience that I like learned about opportunity, and everybody's got a story. And I learned by looking at somebody, you cannot tell how they're interpreting information. Like, I had a student that was like literally covered head to toe. I mean, I have tattoos, but this guy was like, his eyeballs were everything was tattooed. and he was like, loud and, boisterous and whatever. Just they're on drugs sometimes, and I was like, "Oh my god." And it was hard for me to figure out, like, what exact, because it's different in prison. What they are have access to is not really like what I mean, you can kinda tell when somebody's high or whatever, but I was like, "This is a whole nother like, universe that I was not aware of," because, fortunately, I've never been to prison. So, it's like this big swing from private yachts to prison. But, and then this guy ended up getting, like, the highest score on the ServSafe manager test, and, I mean, which is, like, a really hard test to take. I mean, I know chefs that have been, in the industry that don't pass, and so, I definitely learned not to talk judge a book by its cover. I treated everybody exactly the same because my job was not to be, and this was an interesting life lesson that I kind of taught myself at the time. I kind of made a deal with myself that I was not the victim. I was not the judge. I don't know these people. I don't know their case. All I know is that my job is to teach them a skill that they can use when they are released so that we reduce the possibility that they may go back to prison. So, I had a student that was like, you know, his, he's the family business was cutting catalytic converters off of cop cars, and I was like, "Aren't you flying a little too close to the sun? Couldn't you use other cars to cut them off of?" But whatever, that's not. And he was grateful that I was teaching him a skill that he could use because he was like, "That was the skill I was taught." Like it was like, "All right, this is what we do." So, it was interesting. I learned about a lot about our opportunity and how that impacts somebody's life. I mean, everybody, and I also learned that everybody is a bad day away from prison. You can totally mess up in some way, shape, or form and end up there yourself. So, in order to like I found it really important to have compassion for people within reason again, but, to not assume anything, that I know how they're interpreting information, and to, I use a lot of, like, trauma-informed teaching techniques to give people space to, come back around and reset and, keep on going forward. So, I was really, really, it was a really hard, couple of years that I worked there. It was not a great environment for me in that, like, things, it was never the inmates that were a problem. Like, they were always I really always enjoyed working with them. It was just the environment because, the AC would cut out and I would be in a 103-degree, room trying to teach these guys, and, like, it just there was some issues there that I couldn't reconcile with continuing on and, like, risking more of my mental health. So I ended up leaving there. However, I still connect with some of the guys that because it was a men's prison, some of the guys that have already been released, and some of them are doing catering, some of them are working towards, like, opening food trucks. They email me. I always tell them I'm proud of them, and, if they don't have anybody in their life that is able to encourage them, then I at least try and offer that. And then I always tell them to go to a meeting too. Go to a meeting. I've been sober 5 years from anything. And, I had addiction issues myself, and so, I kinda relate to them that way, but, I always just remind them, even if they don't say that they're, doing XYZ, I just tell them, "Go to a meeting. Have you been to a meeting? When's the last time you've been to a meeting?" Just to kinda keep that coaching, going along. Yeah, it was a big time. I know stuff that I don't wanna know. Like, I know so much stuff that I won't get into, but I'm like, "Oh my god." Like, I definitely think at some point I have to write a book because I have to, like, purge my brain of all this stuff that I've learned.
Yeah, that may be the feeling an author has before they do their
Yeah,
first book.
yeah.
And congratulations, yeah, on 5 years sober, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
thanks, thanks.
Yeah, and with just in general, yeah, hearing about the classes and just the individuals there, it's like you really don't know the stories of these people. It's so interesting. Like, everybody is just as complex and capable in certain ways. And it's just like I loved what you said about a bad day away from prison. It's like, it really is that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And cool. Yeah. The second thing is just on that same line of the diversity and the differences of people you work with and encounter. It's like Independence Landing. Could you explain what that is and kind of the uniqueness of it? And it seems just inherently fulfilling from what you've said about what you were providing for individuals at the prison and then just individuals in general and now with what you're doing at Independence Landing.
Yeah, so, like, I love teaching and learning about food. That's, my main passion in life is just teaching and learning about food. And this opportunity came over the summer to do some consulting for Independence Landing, and what Independence Landing is, they provide safe, affordable housing for adults that have a range of intellectual, cognitive, and physical disabilities. And it's basically like, apartments, where people that have IDD, which is intellectual or developmental disabilities, if they're able, if it's time for them to adults to live on their own, it's a great place that provides that. I mean, they pay rent, and there's a lot of wonderful like lifestyle things for them to do, like golf and things like that. So they have like kind of like wraparound services as far as that's concerned. It's just a really, when I started working there as a consultant, to kind of help their workforce development program come to fruition and open a cafe on site, then I really just fell in love with the residents and the environment. And it's just a really great place that really just that it exists is extraordinary, and that people are thriving and happy, and it's just a lovely place to be. Then I eventually took on the role of culinary director. So I'm overseeing the workforce development program and the running of the cafe, and it kind of dovetails together as far as like our workforce development program is culinary, and the cafe. A lot of residents, most of our employees are residents, and yeah, we get into that kitchen every day and continue to learn and grow and reach new goals, and it's just an extraordinary experience. So I just love like working with people and looking at them and trying to understand what help them figure out what they want to excel at, where their like natural abilities as far as their what their skills are. Like, for instance, there's I have employees that are really great at inventory, and organizing. And I mean, that's so important in food and beverage because it can be like really chaotic. And if you have that one person on staff that can help with counting inventory, keeping track of inventory, frickin' making sure the storeroom is not look like a disaster, it's like it's a huge blessing, and there's another employee that's really great at baking. And so like, he does a lot of the baking, and we're starting to really build up our baking repertoire. So it's going really well right now. We're serving the residents, and we have like hopes for how this can grow in the future. So basically, happy faces all around, happy residents, happy resident employees. We're kind of against the grain. It's unusual. We're like, but we're just changing hearts and minds, because again, it all just circles back to like not judging someone by looking at them and be like, you can't do this, you can't do that. I think it's the worst thing in the world to look at somebody and say what they can or can't do. I think I think it's unintelligent to you should always kind of give people space to be them and work with them, and with a little bit of coaching or a lot of coaching, you never know what somebody can accomplish. And so that's kind of like the space I'm in every day, and honestly it fills my heart like every single day. Oh, I think my camera went out.
Yep. It's looking good. Oh, the fireworks. Happy birthday.
What happened?
I don't know. I guess I did the thumbs up and it
There it
yeah.
goes again.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Yeah. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's such a cool thing. Like that whole
Yeah.
story is great to hear in general. Just, what you were saying about you can have all this money and you can be doing something that gets you a lot of these certain resources, but that may not be the the ideal goal for you. It may look enticing right now for this stage of life, but it's
Mhm.
like long term, you want to do something that you feel fulfilled in and that you feel is purposeful. So, because you're going to be spending a lot of your time, most of your
At
time
work.
doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, so I'm like, I feel really like, I feel really, to be not to be like a cliche, but I feel really blessed to like have had this opportunity come along where, I just really enjoy what I'm doing. And I feel like it's like really impactful and it forces me to continue to keep growing and learning and teaching, so.
The last questions I have were about specifically your product. um, One super interesting thing about you is that you have a actual product that you sell as well. It's called Pro Seasoning. Could you share like a brief story about Pro Seasoning, like how it came to be, and then we could go from there.
Yeah, so like I always made like an all-purpose spice blend, to use as wherever I cooked. So, I would just mix a batch of it and then keep it as like an all-purpose seasoning to use on hand. And the short story is that like I always had it by the stove and my wife was like, "Oh, can you make more? Can you make more? Can you make more?" And my parents, I made it for them and they always had it in their house and then they were like, "Can you make more? Can you make more?" And then I gave them the recipe and then they started mixing the spice themselves and like giving it out as gifts and I was like, "Okay, we gotta like put this in a jar." It's obviously people like it. Yeah, so I have a co-packer. They pack my spice for me. So I do that method so that I can spend more time selling, the spices rather than like blending it myself. Obviously, it would cost me less money to blend it myself, but then you have to have a facility and all the other stuff that comes along with it. So I just buy a finished product. They're my recipes. They sign a non-disclose, and I make sure that the ingredients are like the highest quality possible. We don't use any anti-caking agents other than ground rice. A lot of spices have silicone dioxide and things like that to prevent the spices from caking. But sometimes I really feel they just really pack it in there so that they can make the spices last, stretch further. Because if McCormick saves, I don't want to get sued by McCormick, but if a big box brand spice company can save a nickel on each, jar of spice, obviously that's a tremendous amount of money. But to me, it doesn't make a difference because I'm so small. I'd rather spend the nickel, and put out a good product. So, so I have an all-purpose spice rub. My website is chefnikki.net. I ship all over the U.S. I sell locally. I sell wholesale to different places around town. The Prepared Table sells my spices. Red Eye Coffee sells my spices, and I partner with a lot of people that give it out as Christmas gifts. So I'll, if you do like a large order, I will sell it to you at wholesale prices. And I also have a barbecue rub that is made from coffee. It's got cinnamon. You know, it's got cinnamon, brown sugar. Like again, it's really coffee forward, so it puts a really great bark on your barbecue. I did 2 Thanksgiving turkeys this year. One was rubbed with Pro Seasoning all purpose. The other one was rubbed with the barbecue blend. And the barbecue one I put on I spatchcocked it and I put it on my my pellet grill, and then I put a little maple mustard shellac on there.
Yeah.
And then I have a steak seasoning, which is the main component of that is porcini mushrooms because I love like the umami, aspect. It's got porcini mushrooms, shallots, black pepper, Himalayan pink salt. So it's really good ingredients, and I try and run the business debt free. So I don't really, I could be growing much faster with the business, but I learned some mistakes from my first restaurant and everything, and so I keep it debt free, and I like to keep it that way. So anytime I make any money, I just put it right back into the business, basically. So yeah, I'm really proud of it. It's I've had the spice company for about 6 years now, maybe 7 years now, and we get some really great feedback. I give a lot of it away to, different organizations to use as fundraisers and things like that. So, it's just a cool thing, and I use it myself. I mean, we use it in the restaurant at, Independence Landing, so hopefully one day I'll get my act together and start doing, like, restaurant size jars because I really the steak seasoning is something pretty awesome, and obviously you can use it on other things other than steak, so it's really great in potato salad, it's really great in, chicken salad, it's awesome on veggies, it just gives a really nice umami flavor, so, yeah, that's pro seasoning. I should tell you the tagline, "Made by a pro so you can cook like a pro."
Okay, because I was gonna ask you, one thing is, like well, these are, like, the kinda 2 final questions. I would say one is, what separates pro seasoning from other seasonings,
Mhm.
like, from your perspective?
From my perspective, it's, made by a chef. A lot of spices are made by food scientists, and cost is, like, a major factor in what's gonna go in there. So, I've used my all-purpose spice blend my entire career. It is balanced by me, it's in my opinion, it's pretty great. So, it's like a one and done type of, I like to, streamline things for people, so they don't really have to, do any of the work. I've already done it for you. Um Another thing is it's small batch. It's blended, fresh in small batches. I buy like a pallet at a time. It's not like I'm, like making 5,000 jars and it's sitting in a warehouse somewhere. And, again, the really high quality ingredients and the fact that we don't use like any anti-caking agents. But I would say probably like the main thing is it's made by a chef. It's not made by a food scientist. And that is nothing against food scientists. We need them so that we don't die of botulism, and that kind of stuff. And they're, but I will say in this space, like I do think that, we had come away from high quality ingredients. And now, big box brands are coming out with small batch and it's like, "Ah, dude, now you're trying to take that from us too? Like, thanks." So, buy local, buy small, from my opinion, support the smaller, independent people so that
So one of the if you had if ingredients were considered like core values or virtues to live by, what would be the 3 metaphorical ingredients for your winning recipe in life?
Oh, okay, 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 I think I gotta,
To
like, use
ex
my brain here. Okay, so, like, I would say, in a core ingredient would be integrity, continuing learning, and positive attitude.
Cool. One of the core values of like Michael and I for the winning recipe has been resiliency. There's been a lot of challenges and just
Mhm.
an independent project. We're not really making anything off of it, but we believe there is a good impact that people like you are kind of showing that like we can provide like an education, like some type of value for the audience. Do you have any examples of like resiliency within your professional or personal life that you're open to like sharing?
I mean, just keep going. I'm not the typical type of chef. Like again, I'm 5 feet tall. I can barely reach a lot of things. It's a very male dominated field. And you gotta have confidence goes a long way. Stay confident. Stay focused. Um, and show up on time. And that that's being resilient. Just keep going. People are there's gonna be a lot of haters out there just telling you it's not possible, you can't do that. Like that's what they're gonna say. Everything is gonna be no, 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 no. And you just gotta kind of believe in yourself, believe in your product, and believe in your ability, and you'll get where you'll get where you need to go. Like it's coming. So just stay on the path, and you're gonna deviate, maybe, who knows, but you jump right back on that path, and just keep believing that in your abilities, and you'll get somewhere.
Awesome. Well, cool. I mean that was pretty much everything. I guess the final question is there anything that I did not ask you that you want to share or that you would like to respond to?
Well, I will say, I mean, I know that, like, from what I understand, like, the purpose is to of the podcast and your project is to, kinda help people along that are starting out and things like that. So, I will say, it's kind of circles back to the resilience thing is just, believe in yourself and keep going and I don't know, just stay focused and try not to let too many people tell you what's possible and what's not possible. You can have mentors and stuff that are like, "Hey, you shouldn't do this," or whatever, and that's great. That's great. But like a layman on the street, like don't let anybody get you down and let try and tell you that something's not going to work or whatever. Because, anything's possible. Anything's possible in the whole wide world.
Awesome. And you're living proof of it. You have like so many things going for yourself. That's so cool.
I mean,
Especially
I'm
like
doing
the
stuff.
product.
I'm not really like I mean, it is what it is. Just like, I'm always continuously improving, so you never know what's next.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Nikki, thank you so much for the time and patience and
Well, I want to thank you guys for the opportunity to come and share a little bit of my story and kind of give people a different perspective on what they could do and yeah, I really enjoyed learning about what you guys are doing. So, I can't wait to see what happens next for you guys.